have met, I was trying to think, or the first time I came across your work was probably in 2015 in the exhibition Key to the City on Leipziger Straße. But I think we were not properly introduced to one another. A beautiful exhibition where you showed a work which is in your presentation today? No. So then I can tell quickly, there's a beautiful piece in the exhibition where you entered the exhibition space and there was a huge, large gray textile, a carpet when you look closer, that was like coming from the wall into the room. And what Jewi did, and that kind of best describes you in a nutshell, the day of the exhibition, or shortly before, which was on Leipziger Straße, she rolled out a huge, large gray carpet on Leipziger Straße and collected the traces of the cars kind of going over Leipziger Straße, rolled it back up and put it in the exhibition. So all you saw on the minimalistic piece were like traces, car traces actually, on that carpet, and that was it. And it really touched me. And then I think maybe a year later, at some Biennale event, I think we were standing in line trying to get in, and I don't know if you remember that, but that's when we first kind of chatted, and then over time we got to know each other, and I had the honor to work with you on an exhibition in Munich in 2019, and also last year on another exhibition. We did a book there, and we're currently working actually on your first monography. So I'm really thrilled that you're here with us. I'm particularly thrilled also for you guys because Jewi comes from the UDK. She graduated here at the UDK, and also not so long ago. Coming from fine arts, well, you'll explain your work, but Jewi's work is always connected to traces, just like I described with that carpet, and you're making the invisible visible, or the visible invisible, but in many ways you are like a pathfinder, or you're looking always searching a trace finder, and I'm as a curator deeply inspired also by your work, because it makes me think, it makes me kind of look at spaces in different ways, and also makes me think about what we leave behind in many different ways. That said, a warm applause for Jewi. The stage is yours.
Thank you. Hi guys, nice to meet you. My name is Jewi Lee. Good. As Lukas introduced me already, I studied at UDK. As you guys did, I graduated 2014. I graduated fine art and studied in a painting class, which is surprising for many people because I do mostly installations now and very conceptual, but I did actually study very classical painting. After that, I continued the postgraduate study in art and context. I don't know if any of you guys do it or know it. It's also at the UDK, and this I finished quite recently, 2018. But the history, like the connection or the relationship with the UDK goes even deeper because I come from an artist family. My both parents are artists, and when I was 5, they came to Germany. So I'm Korean originally, born in Seoul, and when I was 5, my parents decided to continue the art study in Berlin because it was cheap and you don't have to pay any university fees. So I grew up in the garden actually, and I was very little, running around those buildings. So I'm very familiar, and it's my second home, I feel. I haven't returned since a long time, so today is very special. And I very envy you guys because of the Studium Generale. I think it just started when I was graduating, fine art here. And I think this is actually the only thing I really missed while I was studying at UDK, that it was a pity that you were always too cool for school and not really had the chance to meet other students from other faculties. And this is what I really felt a pity, because that's so enriching to collaborate. I mean, the future is collaboration, I believe. Sorry. So use this opportunity that UDK has this platform now, Studium Generale. I think artists should date architects, you know, like do collaborations, do brandings together or whatever, help each other. Most of my projects are like really supported by a lot of other other people who do normally other jobs as well. So this is something I really want to tell you guys to appreciate that. I brought 4 projects I want to share with you guys. The first one is Blind Applause from 2016. Actually, this exhibition was the first collaboration, the first show with the gallery Sex Hour in Berlin. So it's also the gallery I'm representative of. And when my gallerist asked me, I mean, I was still doing art in context, right? I mean, I felt as a half artist because I studied fine art, but I finished fine art, but so I was very excited to do the show, but I also felt a lot of pressure, and I wanted to do something special and impress also. At the same time, I thought I wanted to do a show which is the first show in a gallery space that is not sellable. So I wanted to, and I don't know if you guys know the gallery Sex Hour, but it's in Weißensee, a huge room, like, I don't know, 15 by 15 meters, so quite huge hall, exhibition hall. And it's very difficult to fill that room. So most of the artists, I feel like, arrive with a lot of art pieces to not to let it feel empty. So I wanted all the opposite. I wanted a very conceptual work. I wanted only one piece, one clear piece, and which is not sellable. So this is the installation I did. It was a single work. You arrived at the opening and you just encountered this installation, everything in white, as you can see. It's a stage, a manege, on the floor filled with white, gray, like kind of sand, but it's oil binder you use in, if you have a car accident on the street, you put it on the street so it soaks, it's like granulat, something. On the top you see a trampoline upside down, and I don't know if you can see it well, but the tent, like the shape of the fabric in the middle is shaped as a tent. So this is the stage or the manege from above. What I did for this installation is I wanted to conceptually, I wanted to talk about or like reflect about the art scene, a gallery show, about the opening situation, everybody arriving quite well dressed, you know, like showing up and saying hello, and like this kind of social event. I wanted, I don't know if I wanted to criticize it, but I wanted to reflect it, like to play with it. So when I wanted to use that gallery opening setting, I was imagining like this whole tam-tam. I came up with, I remembered a short essay of Kafka, which really touched me. He wrote in one short essay, he had like 2 parts, and one part was describing both are describing our circus show situation, but the first one, like the one is describing it very in a glamorous way, you know, like the spotlight on this woman riding on this white horse, having a beautiful dress on, and everybody clapping. And the other part is describing exactly the same scene, but in a very focused, to put the artist in a very hungry artist, very dependent on the audience, the poor artist situation, which is both always coexisting, right? So I found it very touched how Kafka used circles. He did it also in other texts, how he used it as a metaphor to describe being somebody, being an artist, because it is very schizophrene, I think. Like in one hand, like always feeling very naked because you make yourself very vulnerable, but at the same time, and this other part, like being under the spotlight and people clapping, right? So I invited a circus before the opening, a whole circus with the animals and clown and the fire jungler and everything, and I let them to perform with the whole music and with the chronologic we did. They did a whole show on my stage. So those are the traces. So what you could see in the exhibition was a sand, I call it the sand drawing. So you could see all the drawings, the circles left for you. So my idea was you arrive to an opening to see a show, but the show's gone already. So I also wanted to talk about like missing out something. Also the FOMO in our society, I also have. And so the show without the audience and the audience without the show. And those photos I'm showing you now are like making of photos with, how do you call it, long exposure photos. So every time when one artist came into the stage, I opened the shutter and I closed it down, so you barely see something, right? And yeah, so like ghost photos. So all the photos were published after the exhibition, like all the making ofs. So during the exhibition itself, it was only this installation with a sand drawing on it and an exhibition text which was very poetic, very abstract, written, like quoting Kafka and also describing the missing out something and something like gone, like being gone already. And I found it even stronger not to show the camels or the llamas or the horse in a white cube, but I found it stronger to stand in the room, to read the traces and to understand slowly that here, like you had different animals in this room. And this luckily really like happened successfully. Like people, in the beginning people were very impatient, they were standing around the stage and they were like very like waiting for something. Then they understood that nothing was gonna happen. And then after a while, but some people were really complaining like, okay, where's the performance? Is something happening now? Or like, did I miss something? I'm not that late, you know, like everybody, because we are very, in our generation, I think we are very like fast consumers, right? Like how we use Instagram and all the social media and like how we are like very impatient and like giving something a time, right? So this was the situation in my opening in the beginning, but also I think it worked well because my gallery is in Weißensee. Once you are there, you don't leave the gallery so easy because it's very far away. So you stay there and drink your last beer there. You finish your evening there, right? So I was very lucky with this situation. So after a while, so people were talking, and then reading the text, and slowly it was like a myth, like storytelling between the people, and like guessing that there were animals, and like, okay, animal traces, walking in circles. It's already an indexicality, like, you know it from the circles, right? So I found very interesting, people were whispering in this room, but I don't know why. I think it's because of this color white, or maybe it was a stage situation, the respect you have in front of a stage. Those are some making up photos. Oh, sorry. But this is like has been never published. I'm just sharing with you guys. I wanted to share this work with you because of two reasons. Because it was the first solo show I've ever had, and I wanted to share all the thoughts, the process, like how I wanted to concept the whole show. And the second is I barely had any budget, and I was looking for, and when I had this idea, I started to interview, like visit circuses for 9 months. And I met a lot of circus families, and I saw their shows, like, and I talked to them, and most of the circus people, the families, they are very sadly quite poor. I don't think they will survive the next generation anyway, also because of the animal issue, and also they're nomadic, you know, like the kids don't really go to school. I mean, they're very parallel living people. I mean, the kids, the teenagers, they didn't even know how to drive a U-Bahn or S-Bahn, how to get a ticket. You know, it's very interesting. Anyway, but so I don't think they will survive the next generation, like financially, and being realistic. So every time when I wanted to collaborate with them, they were always like, yeah, but how much can you pay? Because they were also used to this film productions and stuff, and I was like, I mean, I just finished school, I don't have really budget, and it's not about like buying you in this sense, but I want to collaborate with you, like, and I wanted to understand also like the visible, invisible, the audience, and the missing out something, and that you are gone already, but your trace, like somehow the spirit of your show is still there, like manifested, like written on the floor and everything, until I met the Circus Bush. So of course I paid them like an artist fee, but it was a collaboration and they really enjoyed, and I spent like 3 months visiting them every week with some cake and watermelon, sitting in the Wohnwagen, the trailer, and becoming friends with them, right? So, and also I found other solutions. Okay, I paid them very little, but they were very happy to collaborate because they loved this idea. Also, they got the photos of themselves, and yeah, like I found different solutions. The next work is Incision from 2018. I will just, I hope you will understand, because all the 4 projects are very kind of different in the first sight, and you might ask yourself like, oh, but somehow like, but there's this connection, like me being very interested in when absence and presence encounter, like coexisting, or the moment where the past meets the presence and stuff like that, like, and the question about indexicality, so the trace. So Incision is a work I dealt with my background with the Korean history. As you all know, like the most strict border on our planet is between North and South Korea. And me as a South Korean person, of course, I'm not allowed to enter North Korea. And I mean, yeah. What I did for this work is I noticed that, I mean, the border now, it's called DMZ, Demilitarized Zone. But what I noticed is that we Koreans, the very first border, the Soviets and the US set, I mean, they set the border, right? So because Korean War, it's the Cold War situation. It was the Cold War situation. So when they set the border, they just saw where the half is, and they did a very straight line through Korea. It was the 38 parallel, so 38. Breitengrad. And the decision was made in the middle of the night, like very quick, within like 30 minutes or something. So and this was the start of the whole tragic, and we are still, I mean, yeah, still separated. And because of that, for Koreans, the number 38 became a synonym for like our border. But actually, when they put the border, after a few days, the Korean War happened, and not few days, but like immediately the Korean War happened. So the border moved a lot of times like up and down, like north and south. So this border 38, we are, as a collective memory, never really existed, right? And this is also, for me, kind of a trace. It's like a collective memory, but trace can be everything. I believe it could be the trace of the stain or the mark of your coffee cup in the morning, but also like a trauma or whatever. I mean, so I was very interested to have a look or to research how did the 38 parallel the border. Did it have a physical form, or how was it back then? Like, why is it, and what is there now? And then you can see on this is a screenshot of a Google Earth that the original border, so the scar of Korea, is divided in half, because the yellow line you see there is the DMZ, the border now, and so like now on South Korean part where I had access to, where is the half of the original border, like, I mean, like, but the original border doesn't have a physical form, yeah, it's just the idea, and the other half is there. So yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Good. Yeah. So this is the border to have a closer look. So I set myself, so I needed a structure to discover this border, so I divided it into, for me, a neutral number 10, so I divided it in 10 pieces, like exactly and with same distances from each other, from one point to the next one, and I discovered that 5 points of my markings were in South Korea, and I set myself a goal to travel from one point to the other one, and to see what is happening there and what kind of traces I can find there. And quite quickly I became clear that I mean, it's very close to the actual border now, so there are not so many. There are some villages, but they're not developed because people don't like to love to live close to the border. So, and because it's so close to the actual border now, most of the regions were military zoned, like military zone. You'd, as a normal person, don't have access to. And then I came up with the idea. Actually, I was always interested in trees because recently I had this idea, maybe because of the Disney cartoon Pocahontas. But in many countries or cultures, trees symbolize like a human gegenüber, like or like they symbol a life or a family, right? So it's always like the upstanding the partner in front of you. So I wanted to, on my like navigated zones, I wanted to find old trees, and I mean, trees, as you all know, they grow, they absorb a lot of not only energy, but also like the way they grow, they accept a lot, they absorb a lot of their environments, right? So for me, their body and their body were like archives or like memories in a very abstract form, like from their environments. So I came up with the idea to find older trees than the border on my points. So, and to use a traditional Korean printing technique, and to print their barks. Kind of portraits for me of the silent witnesses standing on this line. So here are some making of photos. And the technique takbon, it's called in Korea. It was used to print like gravestones or like very important documents or like cultural like treasures or something. And it's I mean, it's not like it's coming from China before Korea, so it's something coming from Asia. And it's an older technique than frottage, obviously. And so I'm using you call it here rice paper, right? But hanji paper, I call it. It's the Korean paper made of a mulberry tree. It's the same paper you use for calligraphy and the Chinese ink. And while I was doing, I mean, I told you, so along this line, along this original border, I decided to have a structure and to divide it in 10 pieces. So it was kind of a controlled accident situation. And I was so lucky that on my third point, it landed just at the end of a land. And I was so lucky with it, because imagine like a few meters above and it would be underwater and the concept wouldn't function, right? Because there's no tree. So this is, I was very happy to do that. And then I discovered, but actually when I got there, I discovered that I can't reach the point from the land side because it was too wild, too many mountains and like really dense. It wasn't impossible to cross through the forest. So I was spending there quite a lot of time to find a solution how I could reach that point to make the imprint, until I met this guy who had a little boat and who loved my idea, and he took me with his boat. I mean, I think we started like really somewhere else, and then we traveled there to find my tree. And then when I arrived there, I discovered that I forgot my papers because I was so nervous. In general, along the border, I was quite nervous when I was doing this project because it's very close to border, so you encounter a lot of militaries, and in some points you're not even allowed, so it was illegal what I was doing. And then, of course, those people don't understand that you're doing an art project, you know, so like they don't have this understanding, or like, yeah. So I was very nervous, but thankfully, because I forgot my paper, I got this beautiful shot. This is me with this man, because I was there with the artist Misha, who supported me. And when we arrived at the little point, I discovered, oh, I forgot the paper, so I had to drove back, and he stayed, and he was waiting for me, shooting this very beautiful photo. This was the print when I arrived, the tree when I arrived. Then other points, I mean, it's the fourth, it was also a challenge because many of the forests, this is a sign, because of course since the Korean War, the forest and the mines has been cleaned officially, but you always see a lot of signs that, and you sometimes read it in the newspaper that there were still some mines left, and people who were collecting mushrooms stepped on it and hurt or died or whatever. So everywhere you saw those signs, so kind of challenging and a little bit scaring me, but I survived. So those are the prints, the results, the portraits or the fingerprints of the witnesses. And as you can see, like all trees, like they have such different aura structure, and I don't know, like different personas, I find. This is how I exhibited them in my gallery. It was on purpose, so I decided to hang them not in the middle, but very on the right, because the 5 other trees of the 5 on the North Korean part are still missing, right? So I wanted to also to communicate that a little bit visually. So this is how I made the decision to put it very right. On the floor, this floor installation is called Fracture. It's the same material, gravel, just in 2 different colors. And the visitors like with their movement, they should break the. My idea was that they should break the border, so it's like a moving floor painting or something, and it's like finished by the interaction of the art of the visitors. Which was funny though is that people in the beginning, in the first hours, they all lined up here. And there was no sign not to enter the other part, you know, like just, it's the same material, like, and it was so interesting. People were standing there and trying to look at my works on the wall, like far away. And even if somebody like did a mistake and there was a stone on the other field, they were collecting it back. And this I found so interesting. It was like a social study, because like how we are trained, because of the 2 different color fields, you understand it as a border, right? And border, we learned not to cross. So that was so insane to watch, like all the adults standing there until the kids arrived. And the kids, they were mixed. They were like standing on the border and mixing up all those stones. And I was like, yeah, finally, you know. Yeah, it was very, very interesting. Kids were so much freer. Yeah, and those photos are like before the opening, when I did the professional shooting. Yeah, so the gravels got mixed. Unfortunately, I forgot to put I also had a very small camera on the ceilings, so to have a documentation about the floor piece like changing over 1.5 months. But yeah, you can imagine. The next project, should we do questions in between or like at the end?
I don't know what you guys do.
Could you please say again the name of the previous one in the order?
The title?
Yeah, the title.
Incision. Incision.
Okay,
Yeah.
Do you feel like questions now, or should we wrap it up and then questions? I take it as the second.
Questions now? Questions now?
If you have one, then go ahead.
Are you planning to finish the piece with the 5 missing spots?
I wish, but I don't know. I mean, I'm not allowed to go there, so yeah, I hope to finish it, but I don't know if I will see if the wall will fall until.
Because that just lends itself to collaboration. You could collaborate with someone on the other side of the wall.
No, it's the most it's the most dense border ever. I can't communicate anything with a not Korean person. It's very, very strict. It's not like in Germany. Yeah. Yeah, but maybe when I'm like 80. No, I don't know. I really don't know if the border will fall, or if the wall will fall or not, if I would see it in my life or not. So the next, should I continue?
Yeah.
The next project is Ashes to Ashes. This was inspired by the time when I was at Villa Romana. I got the art prize, Villa Romana prize, in 2018. I lived 1 year in Florence, in this villa, and close to Florence, but actually between like Pisa and Florence, there is this huge forest called Monte Serra. And 2018, they had a huge forest fire, and all my friends were talking about it, and like it was such a scandal and dramatic situation. And after the forest fire, end of 2018, my friend took me to this forest, to this dead forest, and it was very shocking, impressive, and shocking, and very apocalyptic landscape situations, because it was all black, very matte, very black powdery. Nothing was alive. And also I realized, okay, the silence of a dead forest was incredible. I mean, like, because you don't really realize it when you walk through the forest, that how many sounds you have, right? Like a sound carpet. But I just realized it when it was away. So I got very touched and impressed by this black landscape and dead landscapes. So I started to research like why forest fire happens and like what happens after, and discovered that 97% of the forest fire are caused by human, mostly mistakes. So the natural forest fire only 3%. And then imagine like all the old trees. I mean, we have trees like they're like 100 years old, or like even 50 years old. It's older than us, right? So they disappear and die in a few hours. And if you compare it to our let's save the planet projects, that we plant 1 tree for some like art projects, they will like take ages to grow. So all the thoughts I found very sad, but at the same time, what triggered to do a project with it is to discover that the soil, the Mother Earth, is in its most best condition. So the quality of the soil after forest fire, after the resetting, is so fertilized. So everything can grow and start from the beginning. And this kind of idea that the nature itself has this power to like be reborn or like recover itself, even the stupid human did a mistake. This was inspiring me a lot, that you think it's the end, but in the end there's already the beginning inside, you know, like a circulation. So, and the reason of this fertilized soil is because of the ash. Ash is one of the best fertilization for the soil. So I got, and ash is also like a leftover of something, right? Like just the step before it disappears. I mean, ash you can barely hold and it's like falling apart. So of course, traces and everything, I found it very interesting. So I got very obsessed with ashes, and found out that the very first soap in human history was made just of ash and oil, because ash is very alkalic, I don't know, the opposite of acid. Yeah. So it has a cleaning power. So what I did, I went back to the forest and I collected all the burnt wood and grind it off the surface, the black cold surface, to use it as a black pigment. And with the ash, and I burned, like finished them to ash, and the ash I collected from the forest, I mixed with oil and produced some soap sculptures. So this is the process, so making offs. And these are the results. So they're like this kind of big soap sculptures made of the leftover of the forest. And each soap has an imprint of a burnt wood piece from the forest as well. And often they're showed together, like in a huge amount, as an installation. And there are like many, there are like many details, like how in my concept, for example, I wanted them to be like single, like I wanted to make an installation out of a lot of single soap sculptures, as a forest is made of like single trees, right? And it was also a decision to put the little tree pieces like horizontally, because like the symbol of like living something is often like vertical, and to have it like symbolic in a horizontal lying position. So yeah, this photo was in Hamburger Kunstverein in 2020, I think. And each soap is made by hand, so obviously they have like different gray tones and different. Sometimes they have some like modelings inside. This was at Hamburger Bahnhof. This was actually huge. I think there were like 800 soaps or something. Also in Städtische Galerie Ostfildern near Stuttgart, I had them on the floor. I think there were like 1,200. And on the walls you see another work I also did in the forest. they're like prints directly, like paper. I put all the papers on the tree, burnt tree barks directly, and I peeled kind of their structure, like the coal off. And I really liked to have them like very minimal, quite poetic, very abstract. So it could be like a paintbrush, or some people said this looks like a landscape from, if you look from an airplane down to a city or something. Yeah. And here I had to treat the paper before, because it was the paper itself didn't hold the coal enough, like just by pressing it. This is a piece, I think, more than 3 meters long on a fabric. My last project, it's called Vorwurf, reproach in English. Vorwurf in German works actually, is the original title and works much better for this idea, because I was very interested in this phenomenon, Vorwurf, or like reproaching or blaming somebody, because it indicates because this fact itself says that it's building up on, there was a situation before, right? So it's like an echo. It can never be like exist singular. There must be a happening before, and this is following after. And it's a phenomenon like, okay, I blame you for something, so I'm like, it's I throw a fireball like towards you because there was a story before, and it's like a reaction, but it's like on the way to you, but it will also cause a situation or like an emotion on your side. So I found this kind of like, I wanted to understand that better, or like to think about it and to play with it. And I combined it with an idea I had. So this is the house of my grandfather, the father of my mother. I've never met. He died, I think, like 2 years before I was born. So I never met him, but he was the most present, very dominant, and still is person in my family, because he was, I think he was quite a tyrann, very strong personality, and he left a lot of traces in the family. Also not really in a beautiful way. Like, I feel in every single family personality, like on my mother's side, there is some trace of my grandfather, and I found this very interesting, and I always wanted to work with this with my grandfather, and I've never met, but who was always so dominant. And I even feel that in my personality is something from, like given through all the family history. So I went to the house where he grew up, where he until he got married and made his own family, and just looking and discovering objects in his room. And this was his room where he lived in. And what I did is that I peeled the whole wallpaper of his room like in one piece. So all 4 sides, I peeled it off. So this is the peeled off after situation. To have this wallpaper, what I understood as a second skin, or like as an environment he grew in, and like if you believe, I believe that that time, energy, and everything like happening in some kind of they are in materials, saved in materials. And this wallpaper, this is the backside. I had to clean up a little bit to bring it to Germany because otherwise there's this Umwelthygieneamt making some problems. And while I was cleaning the backside from the dirt, sometimes I was like digging deeper, and I discovered that there were like lots of wallpaper layers stuck together, and that in between the layers I found some already covered drawings, paintings, or like some notes of my grandfather, which I couldn't see from the outside because it was in between. And this was describing like everything he wrote there. They were like very like, okay, it was describing his personality so well, and I understood because I always knew his very dominant, a bit aggressive part, but then I understood that he, as the oldest son from 10 kids, like being a soldier with 16, fighting for the Korean War, and returned with a completely broken arm and everything, but he felt like so much pressure about everything. So I don't know, like the willing and the fight in his life, and also he was carrying a trauma. I understood the whole package through this work. And what I did is I brought it to Germany, to Berlin, and as an unfolded room. So this is the ceiling part. This was cut because it wasn't possible to, this was cut already, the piece. But all those walls are connected. It's like one piece. And I stick them to, I made a construction, a wood construction. So if you take off the first wood, it's just the first, the very above first wood stick is just a hanging system. But if you, this doesn't belong to the work. But actually it's made that here it's fabric between the walls. So it's made that you can always like fold the room and like unfold it. And with the found objects, wall pieces, because everything, the objects were always hanging on the wall. And because of this exhibition was about wall, observing, like seeing walls as an archive. I made bronze, with those objects, I made bronze sculptures. Also, these objects were for me like silent witnesses, like hanging on the wall, and you know. So these are the images of the objects I found in the house. And in the wallpaper also I found some newspapers to support the wallpaper, like they were stuck underneath, describing the time and the political and the economic situation of Korea quite well. So yeah, it was very interesting.
The light. Thank you so much. Maybe we keep this in the background. It's a nice picture. Thanks so much, Jewi. Beautiful.
Thank you.
I think it's a big lecture on how do we actually behave in the presence of absence or the absence of presence, no? And I was reminded actually of Devon, of like taking it slower, taking your time with things. And so thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Do you have a question already, or can I start with one? I'll break the ice and then I'll pass the mic to you guys, okay? So I'm actually so familiar with the work, and yes, I'm realizing there's a lot of layers that I discovered while listening to you. And yeah, let's talk about time again. You showed different traces, different media over time. But another aspect of time I'm very curious about, and maybe that's interesting also for all the becoming creatives here, is the time you take to create a project, because they're all, let's say, either not sellable or very hard to sell, except for the prints now, and they take such a long and intense period of research and also of production. Yeah, can you a little bit elaborate on this, actually the notion of time, not conceptually, but really pragmatically speaking, in how you work?
I would say in every project it's very different. I think the actual practice itself is fast as soon as I have the concept, but until and all the concepts are so, like, when I introduce them to you, it's so simple, right? Like, it's very simple and very logical. But to reach that point, I mean, for me personally, I take so much time. And as I told you in the beginning, so until I have a concept and to start a research, to be clear, like, what I want, because very often I guess you feel the same, like you have an attraction to one material. You just like it and find it interesting, but you don't know why. This is one bubble, always like following you here. And then you have one topic which really catches you, but you don't really know like how this is combinable with all your other works, right? So this is all. So there were like so many bubbles always like following me and around me, and sometimes they go more far away, and sometimes I have to catch them back, or But there are moments when I actually plan a project for something that the bubbles they like naturally like click to each other, and they it's, or sometimes like I have like those two, and I'm looking like, yeah, but what did I really wanted to do? Like, what kind of things did I wanted to try? Like what I haven't done before, and then and then and then like it clicks and becomes a project, and then I start to a concept, and then I start to research, or like not then I start to research. It's like always like parallel, right? And as I told you in the beginning a bit, for me personally, I talk a lot with my family and my friends about my ideas, about what I'm obsessed with, what I want to do, and because they give me some feedback, or they say their opinion, right? And it sometimes helps me to reflect, to understand why I'm interested in something, or sometimes I understand, oh, that's actually absolutely not what I want, and sometimes they help me with some, like, they introduce me a material or like something. So I do think for me in my practice, now I'm not talking so much about time as your question, but I think it really helps for me to talk a lot with people. And I'm also a huge fan to talk with curators. And I'm always like, let's do ping pong, I will start with an idea and my obsession, and you give me some feedback. Maybe I will agree, maybe not, but let's talk about it. And to also, I think I'm very lucky not to fear my woundable side. I'm very open with it. I'm like, I have this idea, but maybe you will change it, maybe you can support it, help me, like let's do ping pong.
Just bringing it back to time, but
yeah.
Roughly, on average, how much time do you take for one project? All the ones that you showed, they need like months in preparation.
Yes and no. I mean, like, to find the right circus team, I told you I took like 9 months to interview them, and to get the trust of them, and like to get friends with them, and to develop the idea. But for example, this last project with the wallpaper, when I had this idea and I was in the house, I was visiting the house. No, I had always this idea, I want to see the house and I want to do something with my grandfather. Then I got a call that my family wants to destroy the house. So I booked a ticket right to Korea, and my parents took me to this house, and immediately I had this idea. And then it clicked with my grandfather package, all the emotional, conceptual part. And then I had to take the wallpaper off quite fast. And once I started, because it was one piece, and it was so stiff after all the, I don't know how old the wallpaper was, I couldn't pause. So I had to, because it was breaking, the paper was so stiff already, I couldn't even really roll. So always when I was peeling it off very carefully from the back, people had to hold it, and until, it was a small room, but still. So this was quite fast, the process. It was minus 10 degrees, but you had to do it, And then the cleaning process was important because it was very dirty. So this was quite fast, and until I shipped it here, and then I knew already while doing this I want to exhibit that for my next solo show. It could be a great fit. So yeah.
Cool. Okay. And to you guys, comments, feedback, questions. Sergey. Tim. Ah, sorry. Sorry. Who's Sergey?
I have a question about fear and reception, especially your first work, Linda Beifeld. Since it is your first work, you have this clear vision. You're driven. You have a concept. You just dive into it, make friends along the way. But still, there's this one day where the exhibition will open, and as you said, it's like a piece that has to be digested, and it took a while until people started to communicate and receive it the way you maybe intended or not. I don't know. Also part of the question, but yeah, was there ever fear? How did you sleep the night before? What were your expectations, or is it?
Did you hear it in the back? Okay, so very quickly, the first piece, Blinder Beifall, Blind Applause, the circus stage, since it was very unclear what the reaction will be of the people, and since it was the first solo show and the first really big piece, was she very nervous the night before, not knowing if this will be perceived in the way it was intended? Correct? More or less?
No, I don't know why, but I think this work was very magical. I was so sure, I was so secure with this work. And so I wasn't nervous on that day. I was even late. I think I came 2 hours late for my own opening because of something. Because I had some water damage. My neighbor had some water damage because of me, whatever. But I was, of course, but I was nervous if the animals would adopt the environment. Because you can see that the camels and the horses, they're already moving, when in their home, when they're in their homes, how to call it, in their area where they live, and they listen to your music, they're already they know it, they want to go on the stage. They're so trained, they grew up with this. They're not camels from the desert. They're born all in Germany, right? So they're very old immigrated animal families. So, but I was not sure how they would react to enter a white, neon light on white cube situation where the smell is different, the whole setting is different. And actually every animal was still doing what it should do. They were doing their show, great. But the only animal who made me trouble was the horse. The horse didn't want to enter the gallery space. And we were And the music, okay, the music, and like, where's the horse, where's the... And then it didn't come in. And we're like, okay, and then the guy was like trying to get the horse in with a carrot and with some food and sweets. And then, okay, the music was over. And then like, okay, play the music again. And again. And this was a kind of a nervous situation, like you can't force a horse to go in if it doesn't want, but what about
By the way, I don't know if I remember that as like wrong memories and traces, but my recollection of coming to the exhibition was there was a smell of the animals in the room still, or am I imagining this?
Yeah, some people found it, yeah. And also like in the white manege, sometimes you found some little like a little dung of something, of an animal, or a bit of hair or something. Yeah.
Next question. Yes.
What are your current bubbles of inspiration? What are you working on at the moment?
Huh?
What are you working on at the moment, or like conceiving at the
this
moment?
moment?
What are your current bubbles, like you used to
Yeah,
mention before?
current. With squid bones. I'm working with squid bones. It's so, now, I mean, this is also a good example because I had I'm very like often in Senegal. I also work with a gallery there, and I have a lot of friends there. And now we also started a collaboration, like a bunch of like creative artist people like coming together, like polluters and artists from Dakar. Anyway, so I'm very often in Senegal, and every time on the beach, I found some squid bones, the white, the sepia bones, the cuttlefish bone. I don't know if you're familiar with it. And the first time when I met it and encountered a cuttlefish bone on the beach, they were like so obsessed with this material because it reminded me to my childhood in Korea, and I remembered that object and it is an element. Like in the moment you want to carry it back to your hotel, it's so fragile, it's almost breaking. But if you imagine the wild Atlantic, in this case, ocean, how it arrived, like which journey this bone is carrying on its body, it's so insane, it's so like strong and so intense, and then at the same time so fragile. So I really liked it. I got very obsessed, and I started to collect them every time I saw them. So now I have like 500, 520 kind of things. And I always wanted to try the technique out, galvanic?
Mm-hmm. Galvanizing.
Yeah, galvanizing something. It's just an idea because my studio I had before can only exist because of galvanic company. So this was the first time I understood what's galvanic, like what is it, like why are we lucky to be here because of this company, because there's a long story short, so there was this technique I wanted to do with, and I always wanted to like work with to see the ocean as a pool of memories and history where the history is melted in. And last year I got invited to a group show which will be this April in Martin Gropisbau. So there were like different bubbles, and out of sudden, and now for the group show, which is curated by Bonaventure and Natasha Chingwala, they're talking about the Indian Ocean, like about also the ocean, and but not their main focus is not the ocean itself, but they invited me with another project, but then out of sudden all the bubbles matched, and so now I'm producing an installation out of cuttlefish bones galvanized to have it as a protection shell or cloth or something. Yeah.
Nice. Another question from you guys? Or should I throw one in the middle? Yeah, there's one.
So, given your work is so, in a sense, archival or archive-based in this kind of weird manner or indirect manner, but it's also incredibly material, how do you feel now in this transition we're in the middle of, with so much of the artifacts we have today are digital and not material, and yet there's more and more huge archives, which are all, in a sense, traces, or there's all this metadata, but there's also traces, but it's completely immaterial, and increasingly so much of the kind of absence and presence we deal with is non-material. Does it bring any thoughts to mind for you?
How do I feel about it?
Yeah, pretty much.
I haven't thought about this yet, because I think I also very lately realized, I think it's kind of my interest, being interest about like materialized traces is kind of a therapy for me, I think, because I grew up between Germany and Korea, and my parents always moved every second, third year. So every time I was in a new situation, I had to like prove that I'm cool. I was this alien from somewhere else, and as soon as I had some friends, my parents moved again. So, but this is something I understood lately. So maybe this has something to do with that. So I think I had to always say goodbye to so many things, but always I was somewhere new. And I think this might be the interest of like, okay, if something was physically there and it's away now, like the echo or, you know, what is left from that and the proof, but still the trace is a proof that it was there at a certain time, right? So I think this is very on focus for me now. I don't know, maybe it can be developed in another way, maybe in the future if I have therapied myself enough. I don't know.
But a really interesting question, by the way, and beautiful answer to that too, no? The need for archiving things that might pass quickly again. And on that note, I would, having here the wallpaper of your grandfather, we talked here in the previous lectures often, or a lot of the speakers were very biographical, you know, like how they grew up, etc., how influenced, you did that too. But here it comes to a culmination where your own biography becomes actually the work. You know, as we talked so much about how like the lives and the upbringings influenced all these different creatives that we had here, but here actually that story becomes the work itself. And that brings me back to this thing that Daphne said last time, that she's a failed artist, and that she has such respect for artists because, man, you're pulling down your pants here. This is very intimate, it's very personal, but you bring it out into the public. So yeah, I mean, you said already a lot about it, but wondering how that felt. It must have been also therapeutic in ways, because it's such a personal story that you're giving to the public there.
Yeah. Yes and no, but because in the exhibition itself, the focus isn't really my grandfather. I mean, yeah, I'm communicating to the outer world that it's the house of my grandfather I have never met. But then then this installation is in the room with this weird title, and people don't understand. But this was also my intention. So it's, in some parts, it's also quite abstract, I think. So yeah, because like all the details about the grandfather or the family story isn't told in the exhibition as I'm sharing here with you guys.
Yeah, and I think maybe that's also the beauty, that you leave a lot unexplained. No? And that's what I meant earlier, that like it's really testing us, how do we behave if things are not fully explained, or this thing of the beautiful formulation of the presence of absence, the absence of presence, today we're so used to, like, everything's present, we have to see it, we have to understand it immediately in one image. And no, we are entering in a very ambiguous situation when confronted with your work. You start to think what it could be, just like we're trying to understand traces, but it, it's the real memento moris, the real still lives in that sense, to me, at least. Yes, another question.
I have a bit of a technical question, and can you hear me?
Yes, you have a technical question, and we can hear you.
Yeah, I was curious about the wallpaper. It's on the wooden frame.
Yeah.
So who did the wooden frame? Who put this? Because I suppose it needs some professional skills of a repairman person or something like this. Or you were doing it, or it's some people you hired. How did you manage to put wallpaper on the wooden form?
I did it with some helpers.
Was they volunteering, or you hired them?
No, it was a mix. My brother, who also studied and graduated last year at URICA, he's a great supporter. He and I, and also there were paid jobs, like technicians. Yeah, I mean, everything I planned together and I'm producing together. Here, the challenge was that the room itself had no right angle at all. So the wallpaper, when I had this piece of wallpaper on the floor, it was just like a very organic kind of form. And I had to find right angles and where to cut, because I had this vision, like I wanted to have this very strict room, like kind of this unfolded room situation. So this was kind of a challenge. So the edges I actually cut. Because I had to find the right angle, and then it was difficult to understand where the border of each wall was and stuff like that. But yeah, it was a lot of planning, and and it's.
And maybe on that note, a quick follow-up to this one, and then I see you. Is the notion of collaboration. You said that from the very beginning, that all these projects develop in conversation with friends and family or curators, but also and that's maybe interesting for, again, here's artists and architects and designers and blah, blah. And what I'm stressing here is the idea of collaboration, so that even in a work like this, it takes a lot of people, and it takes a village to raise a child, and that's the same with a project. Can you elaborate on that kind of team structure of yours, or the moving or always changing structure of people that you work with?
Yeah, I mean, project by project, it's very different. And of course, and I mean, before I came here, I thought about because I was so jealous of this kind of a platform, as I told you, right? And I was like, oh, I wish when I studied that somebody would tell me how they, how they did a project like this, and like all the behind stories and also failures, right? And then I asked myself, okay, what would I be curious of if somebody is standing in front of me, who also studied at UDK, and I was like, yeah, for example, how did you find a gallery? But I don't know if there are artists here. But also the second question, how do you finance projects, right? And I'm still struggling with it, and I'm in a very lucky position because to continue with my art projects and to have more, always every year I have more shows, I have bigger shows, and I'm such in a lucky situation, but still I'm struggling, and you always have to be very flexible, find solutions for that. And for this, I think to help each other and to help each other and to give a free hand is one starting thing, but also to collaborate, to enrich each other from different point of perspectives and the qualities you carry on. I mean, that's so important. Like, you should use that, and like, you guys should like keep contact. I mean, now last year it started that I get invited to Kunst am Bau project, like to apply for Kunst am Bau. So it's like invited competition thing. How do you say Kunst am Bau? Like
art in public space or architecture-related installations.
And there I'm working with my dear architect friends, and it's very enriching. We are learning so much from each other.
Okay, there was a question.
It's also somehow a comment. I recognized that this type of wallpaper is somehow also like different from our front side also. Can you maybe change the pictures?
This?
Yeah, like there is also different colors, and like if you also zoom in, and it felt like also it's the only behind paper made it full, and from front it was kind of like, I don't know, this behind story was like kind of somewhat cute design. Did you present this backside also somewhere? Because I have seen this only in the pictures you documented.
Yeah,
but
they're buried inside.
so you didn't show this behind.
No.
Okay. Why did you decide to present it?
Because I love this kind of idea, like the circus work. I think it's to know it's buried in between the wallpaper layers, and you're standing in front of it and you can't see it. Is for me hilarious. It's stronger than like to open it.
Did you share it textually somehow?
Yeah. So in this exhibition, I had a little like artist booklet, only images of the house and situation and the work in progress, making of photos, and then I had like a lot of like text fragments, collected people writing about the phenomenon reproach, but very, very abstract. I mean, you had like images of the house and the work process, and like parallel to that, you had like text fragments. A lawyer wrote about Vorwurf, and a psychologist wrote about this, and what my grandmother said, or like what my mom texted with me, like different kind of definition, or like little text parts. So it was communicated somehow.
I see another question, maybe this one and another, and then.
Thank you first, and then I was wondering, because you kind of didn't deep into it, but you kind of gave us traces of the kind of spiritual side of your work, and this kind of like personhood you're giving to the trees or to the objects or the wall, and I was just wanting to hear a little bit more about that, if you want.
I'm not sure if I understood.
It's a nice question, by the way. So all your works, when you spoke about that, you believe that objects can carry something over time, through time. It stays in the objects, whether it's the wallpaper or whether it's the trees, as you called them, silent witnesses. So there was personhood that was given to them. And this is, if you think about it, there's a spiritual aspect to this understanding. And the question is whether you would feel comfortable to elaborate what you mean with you believe things are more than just objects. That's a good question, by the way.
I mean, I don't know. I don't mean it in a, I think I don't mean it in a, like a spiritual or religious or like this kind of a way, but I really, but what I do think and love is that we human love to believe, or we human want to stick. Imagine this microphone was what Elvis Presley sang into. I mean, this kind of a moment, you know, like I would stand here and like have a totally different emotion to this microphone, right? I mean, and this kind of phenomenon that humans love to be like part of something or believe in something and like touch this proof, and like also it's like an evidence, or like also connected to an existence question, and this kind of thing I really love, that like how we, or like this little shell your ex-boyfriend gave you on your first date or something, you know, like this meaning and all the emotion as soon as you take it out of your I don't know, pocket, that like all the memories come with it. Yeah, like this kind of phenomenon is very interesting for me. Yeah.
There's, by the way, on that subject in the shell, there's a Paul Valéry. Does that ring a bell? French poet, literate, etc. And he wrote this really beautiful piece called Eupalinos, where it's reflecting about life, and two already dead Greek philosophers walking on the beach, and they're looking at a shell, and then they start reflecting about a lot of things. And there's another really beautiful book by Niklas Mark. He's a writer for the FAZ on basically that shell that they both find, that Valéry picks up as this object of remembering and memory. Okay, one last question. Otherwise, you're good? Then we come to our conclusion or final question for each guest, and that's, could you give a final piece of advice to all the becoming creators in the room? Now looking back at what, having graduated, being in the world of art and etc., what piece of advice would you like to share?
I mean, it's very personal. I don't think it's the solution. I mean, the solution is not existing anyway. But for me, I do think, especially as a creative person, or having this job, I do think maybe only 20-30% is a given talent. I do think more than 50% is the Ausdauer, the endurance. Yeah.
Stamina.
And I think to be patient and to stick on things and to continue and to follow and to fail, but to stand up and to walk again and to run again and to do the same mistake, but whatever, is so important, I think. And I think that's so important. And also, when I studied at UDK, I thought so many times about, like, should I change the university? Because, as you all know, every university has pro and contras, and I wouldn't say because I also I was a year in New York while I was studying here, and I mean, other cities and also even in Germany, other universities, some are like much more like universities are teaching you more, you have a tougher schedule, you know, like their more exchanges, And UDK, in my point of back then, in my point of view, it was quite sleepy, and like, yeah. And people wouldn't even recognize when you're away for 4 months, you know, like nothing really happens. But I do, so I thought I had like many times I had this idea, oh, should I change? Do I need more like input or more challenging things? Like, and also when we had like class meetings, like nobody was asking something, you know, like I was like, ugh. But then I think it was the right decision. UDK made me personally very strong and teach me how the life would be afterwards. Because you're so alone, you know? And afterwards you're alone anyway, so you have to find your way, and you have to catch the people who can help you, or you want to exchange with, or you want to help and support, or you believe in. So yeah, maybe UDK, so much freedom teaches you something to find it out. And one quote of Lothar Baumgarten, the conceptual artist, was also a professor here for a very long time, who died unfortunately a couple years ago. He was very strict, and when he came, I was in Grundlehre. I just started, and in my first year, he had a tour, and he said to one person, like, even if it's he said actually two things, and that really helped me to understand my path. Like, he said one thing, like, even after 6 years of study at UDK, you understand that arts is not your thing, it was worth it. So I think that was a very strong comment. Second comment was, he said, even if it's only a pencil in your pocket, be always ready. Because there are moments, and I would say I always say I'm so lucky, but this also means like everybody is lucky. I mean, there are chances and there are like encounters and there are situations, right? But you need to see this moment, or like catch this moment, or be ready and like open, embrace it. And I don't mean not like being ready in a way like being an opportunist or something. Not like that, but just be awake and embrace it. Be curious, like this kind of thing. I think this really enriched my way, what Baumgarten said.
Beautiful advices. Big applause for GB. Thank you so much.